Sandy, where and when were you born?
I was born in Dubuque, Iowa in 1943, and our family moved from Dubuque to the Tulsa, Oklahoma area when I was 2 years old. So I grew up in the Tulsa area.
Was anybody in your family artistic?
My father was. I think everyone's artistic in their own way. Uh, my mother had a flair for decorating, but my dad was very artistic, and probably during World War II, if he hadn't had such an interest in agriculture, and it were it not so important for the male child to be at home running the farm, because all of my grandparents and my family on my father's side were farmers in Iowa, why he probably would have gone to art school. In fact, I have some of his drawings and pen and inks from those early years, and he would enter competitions and magazines, and he did some beautiful pen and ink drawings. And then his mother kept a journal, and she'd do these beautiful little sensitive watercolors of flowers and write poetry. So there was that on my father's side. But, gee, if you really think about it, everyone, it's human nature. It's the human condition to feel and want to create beauty. I mean, it's one of the things that separates us from the animals. That and the fact that we know that we're going to die and they don't. But beauty is a human condition, and the urge to create, I think, is there in all of us. It's one reason I teach. I think sculpture can be taught. I think the mechanics of sculpture, the mechanics of painting and whatnot can be taught. Creating art is, of course, another dimension.
Did you have any formal art education or any mentors?
Yes, I did. Boy, I was really lucky in high school. I went to a kind of an accelerated high school in Tulsa. They had more national merit scholarship winners than any other school in the country the year I graduated in '61. And among the teachers there in the art department was a woman named Sue Johnson. And she was a member of the American Watercolor Society and teaching on a high school level, which is really unprecedented. But back then, art was taught in school, just like music was. And she was a very fine painter. And early on, she took an interest in my ability and my interest in art. And I kept sketchbooks, and I drew incessantly. I drew animals on the farm and all that kind of thing. And she really took an interest in my work. She was definitely a mentor. She helped me put together a portfolio that enabled me to gain acceptance into the Kansas City Art Institute. You had to go up there for an interview. You had to show a portfolio and whatnot. So she was responsible for that. And not only that, during my junior and senior year in school, in high school, if I kept my grades up in my other studies, I was allowed to have extra art classes and to actually be her assistant. So that was really a wonderful thing for me. Sue Johnson, I'll never forget her. And then, of course, Kansas City Art Institute was, when you're that age, you enter. I had just turned 18, and my mind was a sponge, and like all 18 years old. And I was so interested. I was away from home for the first time. I was just inundated with art and with the arts. Kansas City Art Institute is connected with the Nelson Adkins Museum, this wonderful world-class museum. It's right next door to the Music Conservatory, and I would listen to this great classical music 24/7 as the students were practicing. I got very interested and engaged in art history. I had wonderful instructors, specifically in drawing and the fundamentals of art. I wouldn't take anything for that time at Kansas City Art Institute. It was like an accelerated, logarithmic, intense saturation of the arts, not the least of which was art history. It instilled in me a lifelong interest in art history that to this day, I'm sure you looked in my library and there's just, you know, that's what I read. You know, I won't be reading beach novels. I'll be reading about art history and birds, animals.
Do you remember an event or a series of events that led you to become a sculptor?
Yes, I do. It was a series of events. First of all, I was exposed to sculpture and three-dimensional art in art school. But specifically, in 1981, a group of artists went to China that was led by the governor of Colorado and the Driscoll Gallery. It was a contingency, a group of collectors and artists that went over there on a group visa. Our guide was the minister of tourism in a brand new China, not like it is now. You know, Nixon had just opened it up in the late 70s. This was 1981. And it was the most profound travel experience of my life to this day. And I've traveled a lot, but it was just like a time warp. It's like going back in time, and the interfacing with the artists in the group, plus an event that remains with me to this day. They had just discovered the Xi'an Terracotta figures, those big warriors over life-size equestrian and all of that figurative work. They'd only opened up one pit, but it had been featured in National Geographic, and it was just had caught the imagination worldwide. It was just this treasure trove of antiquity. And this trip to China, we were one of the first groups that got to fly in and see it. And it had the antiquated scaffolding, rickety scaffolding that we had to walk around on. It's kind of scary to be up there walking around looking at this stuff. And we were looking down in these pits, and there was just like little ants. The archaeologists were unearthing this, and they had the knowledge and to know what a treasure it was, and that it should be preserved. That experience had such an impact on me. I even dream about it to this day. I mean, it's really something. That was 1981. But another thing that impacted me, that had a profound impact on me, was just spending a lot of quality time with other sculptors. Glenna Goodacre was on the trip. Fritz White was on the trip. George Lundeen, Bill Reese. I mean, the artists. We all loved Bill. Walt Gonski, fabulous painter. A CA artist that's no longer with us, Jim Boren, wonderful watercolorist. But they're just a fine group of artists. We all got acquainted. But on this trip to the Great Wall on the train, and this was a steam engine, like something 100 years ago, as an original printmaker, I was lamenting about the fact that the big juried museum shows, such as Prix de West, back then it was called NAWA, did not include graphics, original prints. The National Academy has a graphics category, along with sculpture, painting, architecture. But I was complaining, really, about why didn't they recognize prints in original etchings and dry points. And it was put to me very succinctly that a $300 etching takes up the same amount of space as a $3,000 or $30,000 painting. It's simply a matter of economics. It's not that they're ignoring you, it's about the money. You know, I mean, I'm a capitalist. It's the American way. You know, it's the business of art. And that really hit home with me. I thought, you know, I get it. I understand that. Not only that, there was a problem going on at that time in the early 80s about the word print in general. To some galleries and even collectors, print meant a photograph of a painting. It had no correlation, or it wasn't thought of as an original work of art, like I had studied in art school and whatnot. You know, my etchings were very small editions, hand pulled, and many of them were hand tinted with watercolor. And so I started thinking about this. I thought, you know, the word print is not what I always thought it was, a noble word, you know, like a Whistler or a Dürer or a Rembrandt or a Zorn. The word print to a collector and even some of the galleries, it means a lesser level, and it's misunderstood, essentially. But I started putting all this together. So here I am. I have the influence of the terracottas in Xi'an, which just blew my mind, just blew me away. I had these conversations about getting into these shows and all that, which I wanted my work to be exposed in front of this caliber of collector that goes to these shows. I wanted my work to be seen by the right people. And yes, I loved having it in all my galleries. I showed in many, many galleries. But I wanted to go to the next level. And to do that, I had to change my medium. And either painting or sculpture. I returned to a lifelong interest in sculpture that I had studied in art school and that I had always been interested in. But printmaking had won over as far as entering the galleries. So I returned to my studio. I was living in El Paso, Texas then. And with the help of some of my sculpture buddies, my friends that I had met, Ken Bunn's always been a dear friend, helpful, Burl Goodnight, Glenna, George, Fritz, with the assistance of some of my friends. Most of them lived in Colorado and up in the Loveland area. And I knew many artists through my galleries, and not just the cultural exchange, the trip to China. And so I got my supplies all together, my plastiline, but but I pretty much mucked through on my own. There were no workshops back then. You couldn't just call up the Scottsdale Artist School and take a workshop. If you wanted a workshop, you could take it through maybe the Art Students League or maybe go to a summer in Skowhegan or something like this. But there were no sculpture workshops and how-tos or tutorials or computers. There were books on sculpture, but they were not the how-to version that we have today. And there really aren't that many today. There's a dearth of how-to tutorials on sculpture. You rarely see it in magazines like American Artist or some of these publications. But fortunately, there are workshops in some of the art academies. But at any rate, back to this other situation, I found myself just kind of figuring this stuff out for myself. I had with an art background and through my friends, you said, well, you know, get through your pipe and showed me how to make a crude armature, but I wanted to do birds. And there was no armature setup that you could go to the art store and buy, like you can with a quadruped or with a human figure. You can actually buy a wire armature pre-made. And so I devised a crude armature with plumber's pipe, very similar to what I teach with and use today. I came up with these ideas and propped everything up, and boy, convoluted. I look at some of my early work and I think, and I remember the struggles with these armatures. I mean, they were something, I'd have them propped up now, this kind of stuff. But birds, because of my interest in aviation, and I got my pilot's license when I was very young, and it was just logical for me to want to model birds because flying it had just impacted my senses, and I just felt like I could create the illusion of these birds in flight. You know, I could just envision what I wanted to do, and that probably was the key to my I hate to say early success, because I remember how I struggled, and I'm not just sure the word success is the word for it, but I got the job done. I got it accomplished, and I got the mold made into the foundry. One way or another, it was a struggle. But the thing that, as I look back on it, I could really envision, before I even started, how I wanted the finished sculpture to look. And I think, I talked to Richard Schmidt about this one time. Has been a friend of mine for years. We were all on a trip to Alaska with Nancy Guzik, and this was back in the 90s. And we were talking about art, and he said one of the most important things, he said, when I paint, he said, if I sit down in front of a canvas and I'm looking at my subject, he said, I can envision how I want that painting to look on that canvas. It's not an experiment. You know, I'm not making a stab at it. I have a plan and I go about it because I know how I want it to look when I sign my name to it. And for some unknown reason, during those early years when I struggled so much with technique and the mechanics of sculpture, the materials and all of that, the one thing I had going for me is I could envision the art. And I find to this day, I try to maintain that to this day. and I refrain from walking up to a sculpture stand and experimenting or dinking around or struggling. Even though armatures are so easy for me now, I've taught it for 27 years. But if I'm struggling with a piece of, with a work of art, or what I hope will become art, if I'm struggling with a piece, I must have a bad idea, or I must not really, it must not be well conceived or thought out. I need to go back to the field. I need to go back to my scrap. I need to go back to the drawing board, get the sketchbook out, get some new input. And that's why I have so many pieces going in the studio. I'll start something. I love the block-in stage. I do not like to model detail. To finish a piece, though, I have to, of course, add a certain amount of it. But my favorite part of sculpture is what I teach, and that's the block-in, the big shapes. And so I'll block in these pieces, and if I get the dynamics and the kinetics and everything I want going, proportions on it, sometimes I'll finish it. Rarely, though. I'll set it aside, and I'll walk in and maybe, oh, bingo, I know how to finish that, or I'll see something in nature or in the field that will allow me to finish it.
How have you seen representational art change in the last 30 years or so, if you have at all?
I've really seen it change. And I remember years ago, sculpture, bronze sculpture was so popular among collectors that it didn't even have to be good. They were buying it. And I think we all know that, but by sheer virtue of it being cast in bronze, it had a collectability to it. And collectors love to have it with their paintings. They love the combination, especially in Western art or wildlife art. They love to augment their flat work and their paintings with sculpture. But to answer your question, the way I've seen it change is the excellence in the art, and this, I think it's caused by this resurgent interest in representational and figurative art that we are enjoying. I certainly didn't think I'd see it in my lifetime. In art school, the focus was so much on abstract, non-objective. I mean, even though when you start at a school as fine as Kansas City Art Institute, you start with the fundamentals and the academia and the basics. But still, the artists of the day were Mark Rothko, Franz Kline, Jackson Pollock, Arshile Gorky, and gosh, the list goes on. It was very, very abstract, and the work was being promoted, touted, painted, and sold in New York. That was the art capital of the world. That's not the way it is today. So over the years, our collector base for our genre of painting is out west for the most part, west of the Mississippi at any rate. And I think a lot of it happened with the proliferation of oil money in Texas, the CA, the Cowboy Artists of America. These beautiful big homes were being built, and they didn't want their decorators going to New York to find art to hang on their walls. So enter the CAs, and it was just, the rest is history. I mean, it spoke to the collector out here, out west. And so what's happened is that we've all shown together, kind of grown up in this business together, been in many of the same shows and galleries, have many of the same collectors, and there's so much excellence now in these juried shows that the artists put their very best in there. You don't want to drop the ball in front of in front of your peers, in front of your collectors, in front of the museum folks. But it's that good old healthy American competition that's made us all better. I mean, we've all, we're all, and I don't think it's a money thing either. It's not that, oh, well, I'm going to, I think it's just the human condition, the human spirit. We all strive for excellence, and we don't want to drop the ball in front of people.
What advice would you give a young, aspiring sculptor today?
Take advantage of the folks who will teach. And I'm not saying, I mean, there's many great courses like what you do. There's workshops. I wish more of the professional painters and sculptors would teach today like they were here a few years ago, but for one reason or another they're not. But to a young artist, if there's a professional sculptor out there who's teaching, even if you don't have to be particularly fond of their work or their subject, but take advantage of those workshops and courses. And I'm saying that from experience because I know how helpful it would have been to me. If you're really young and you have access to an art school like Old Lyme or some of the figurative, there's some really good art schools out there now that concentrate on representational and figurative art, more traditional art. If you're that age and you can do that, to get that academia and those basics and fundamentals, start there. But if it's continuing adult education, it's the workshop. The workshops that are available are unbelievable, in my opinion. And now they're online. Now there are tutorials and there are online courses. You don't even have to travel to take them. Another thing is I used to say to my students is you make up your mind early on if you want to be a professional artist, and you pursue galleries and showing in galleries. But I've changed my mind on that, and it's because of the internet, and it's because of some of the shows that where you can go in and pay a fee, and you have a venue and a format and a vehicle to show your work among other professional artists. So in other words, you don't have to be a quote-unquote gallery artist in my view, to be considered a professional artist or to make it in this business. There's more than one way now, and that's thanks to the internet. There are some artists like myself who are uncomfortable selling their own work, and I think that's just my generation and how I grew up in the art business. I'm more apt to tell a collector what's wrong with a piece of my work. Are you sure you want that? Don't you want this? I screwed up here. So I mean, I'm self-critical, and I can't be objective in front of a collector. Although the big museum shows, part of the success of these shows is because the collectors want to interface with the artists, but some artists are just better at representing their work than others. And in my opinion, the work has to represent itself. And I grew up being in galleries. I'm very loyal to my galleries. I don't compete with my galleries. But I feel like a young artist, someone just starting out, does not have to go that route. They can make a living, be successful this other way. But you do have to make a decision about being in the big juried shows and being in the good galleries. If you make the decision to sell your own work, you will be overlooked by, typically, that you will be overlooked by the galleries and the big juried museum shows, because you're competing with them. I mean, if you put yourself in a position to take collectors that you meet in a big show and sell from your studio, you make up your mind early on which of these you want to do. It's just it's simple. It's just good manners. It's just what the right thing. It's integrity, personal integrity, in how you want to sell your art. And again, some artists are so good at representing themselves that no one can do it better. And I know some of these artists, and they're successful.
If you can go back in time, which artist or group of artists would you like to meet? What time frame or period would you want to go back to?
It would definitely be the animaliers from Barry up through Bugatti. I started to say the Greeks, but I didn't go there. They were so many carvers. I model, but it's kind of a toss-up, really, between the Hellenistic age of Greece and Phidias, the Parthenon, and all those beautiful friezes. But no, it would be Barry up through Bugatti. I try very hard not to be influenced by my fellow sculptors. I really work at it, and sometimes that's hard to do. I mean, we all get ideas and kind of kype things from one another here and there, but boy, that's dangerous waters, because an artist's style and their originality is what you want to find and for yourself. And if you are a knockoff of your favorite artist that's working today, that you don't want to go there. But sometimes you can't help but being influenced by someone you admire. Now, there are many artists working today whose work I admire, but when it comes to influence, I make a concerted effort to find my influence through art of the past and what came before my work, what the derivative. And in figurative work, that for sure is the Greeks. But the clarity of the work, the unbelievable anatomy of Barry is something. If I had to name one artist, if I had to name one living artist that I knew well as a friend and that I showed with, that artist would be Bob Kuhn. His paintings, I think his paintings show more structure for the sculptor to see. I mean, you don't even know that this artist is leading you through the anatomy and the waypoints on his paintings. But I can get more information out of a Bob Kuhn painting, more editing and more clarity than any other artist's work that I've ever looked at.